Hello, this is Michael Kraut with the Idea Dudes. We're going to be talking about creating and configuring websites and applications. Welcome to the presentation. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the Google box. Let's get started. IS 7.0, we've been talking about web application pools. We've installed it onto the web server. Now we're going to be looking at creating a website. We're going to look at the definition of creating a website and just look at the basics of it. What is a web application? So website and web application are pretty much interchangeable. With a website, it's a collection of files that provide an environment that is going to be sent out from the web server to the web browser. And the web application, all we're doing is we're assigning managed code like ASP.NET, ASP, CGI, PHP, and then creating a web application, creating a virtual directory, configuring authentication, and hosting websites in a virtualized environment. So creating a website, we use the IIS manager, and you use the add website wizard under sites. Now you can also do this through the app command, and you can also script it through WMI also. You name the website and assign an application pool. You set the content path and the authentication to the content. So it's going to be the access control list that is going to identify who is going to have access to this content. You choose the binding type, it is the IP address and the port. Remember, this is going to give the uniqueness of the website, because what you can have is you can have multiple websites installed or deployed on your web server. And so based on the IP address, the port number, or what is known as a host header, that'll give the uniqueness. You can set the host header like www.ideadudes.biz. Then what you have to do is you have to configure your DNS with a host record that's going to point to www and have a domain which is ideadudes.biz, for example. So creating a website with the IIS manager, you can see that I'm implementing ideadudes.biz. And the application pool is going to be ideadudes.biz. So it's going to protect the information and I'll designate the actual resources. The content directory is going to be new ideadudes website. What we can do is we can test the actual connect as and also the test the settings so we can make sure everything is working the way it should. Then we have the type is HTTP, or we can select HTTPS, and then the IP address, like I said, all unassigned. What that means is that it's going to listen to all the IP addresses. What we can do is we can specify a specific IP address, and this will direct it to that IP address at all times and the port number, and that gives us uniqueness. And then here's the actual host header. Now if I don't change the port number, I don't change the IP address, the host header is going to be uniqueness. If I want to change the IP address and the port number, then that'll also give you uniqueness. So what you have to do is you have to find something that's going to be unique, either IP address, the port number, or the host header. And then we can start the website immediately. Now, a web application runs a script or code. So, ASP, PHP, any of those different languages that we can use. This is rendered as HTML output and is sent to the client browser. ASP, ASP.NET, PHP, associated with an application pool. And the application pool is going to control the resources that we've been talking about from the beginning. Now, creating a web application, you can navigate to the site that will host the application, click the View Application, and then use the Add Application Wizard. You can set the alias like www.ideadudes.biz/app-name. And so when you get a chance, take a look at the demo, because what I've done is I've actually created an application called Future Value. That way you can see what your 401k is doing at 2%. Assign the application pool and the content path. So adding the web application, what we do is we just go in and use the Add Application Wizard. So you can see right here I'm creating one called training. And I'm going to put it in the default pool, default app pool. And the physical location is actually going to be under the new Idea Dudes website and /training. Now, web applications are a grouping of content at the root level of the website or a grouping of content in a separate folder. Changing the application pool, very simple. All we do is we click on select, and then we select what is the application pool that we're going to assign to this web application. So in this instance, it would be training. Now the directories, there's two types of directories that we deal with. We have the physical, which is the actual directory on the physical machine. And then we have what is known as a virtual. Now a virtual directory can point to physical storage on a local machine. It could be on a DFS, distributed file system, it could be on another server. There's just so many different instances of where it can be. So the physical directory is the directory that's located on the physical file system of the computer. Contains files and additional directories. Now the virtual directory, like I said, is a directory name that you specify. And what it is like a pointer to the physical directory. This can be local or it can be remote. Like I said, we can put it on a DFS, distributed file system, which will give us redundancy for our web content. Virtual directories can include content in your application without having to move or copy files to the application's directory. Now, creating a virtual directory, we navigate to the site that will contain the virtual directory. We click View Virtual Directories, use the Add Virtual Directory wizard, and set the alias. So here we have an example of www.ideadudes.biz/VDIR, which is my virtual directory name. Assign a content path and the authentication. Now the virtual directory wizard looks like this. So you put an alias and a physical path. And that's pretty much it. There's no application pool, as you can see, because it's not a web application, it's just a directory. Now we can create a web application off of that by converting it over to a web application. Now configuring site-specific authentication, you configure the application pool to use a new pool for isolation. Configure authentication for the app pool, assign the site to the app pool, configure the identity, which the default is pass-through. So pass-through means whoever's logged on it's going to impersonate that individual. Enable appropriate authentication. Disable anonymous. You want to get rid of anonymous. You don't want, especially on protected content. If it's a public website and you just want people to just be able to get into it, no problem. But if it's going to be an extranet where you have a intranet type of environment, then you want to make sure you disable anonymous on that application or on that directory. Now the basic configuration steps for authentication. You open IIS Manager, navigate to the level you want to manage. In the features view, you double click authentication. On the authentication page, you select the authentication type. So anonymous, basic authentication, digest authentication, certificate, IIS certificate, Active Directory certificate, forms-based authentication, any of those different ones. Then in the Actions pane, click Enable to use with the default settings. You can also go in and edit the configuration specific settings. Like on Anonymous, we can select a different user, so that way we can control or audit the actual usage. And then we can also go in into our digest authentication and put the realm in that is going to be used for authentication. So here's the actual window that we go into IIS authentication. You can see the little lock here with the person. We double click on it. That brings us into IIS authentication. And you can see Anonymous is there by default. We have ASP.NET impersonation. And you may not see all these. It depends on how many different role services that you put onto the server. What I did is I just implemented all of them so I can show you this in this course. Now, hosting websites in a virtualized environment, you use virtualization to consolidate servers. You treat the virtualized machines like a physical machine, so you want to make sure you have enough memory, have enough hard drive space, and so forth. Use virtual directories redirected to a shared storage solution to store the content, like DFS, distributed file system. Each VM can run a set number of sites and identities. So you have multiple sites onto each of those VMs, and what is the benefit is that we can isolate these different VMs from each other so they're not sharing information. VMs are isolated, each is separate, and you can deploy a site-specific config through the shared content directory. So, creating a website is done easily through the IIS Manager. A web application is a collection of content that is rendered as a series of web pages. You can create web application pools by associating an application pool with a directory. Virtual directories represent a physical directory by name, and configure authentication by selecting authentication under the IIS and the IIS Manager. Enable authentication you want to use and disable anonymous. Virtualization can aid in lowering the total cost of ownership of the web servers, because what we're doing is we're taking the physical servers that are consuming resources such as electricity, bandwidth, electricity, and also the physical servers that it costs money to procure them. We can create a web server very quickly on a virtualized environment such as Hyper-V. Test the virtualized servers as physical servers, or treat them. And then consider VMs as isolated environments and control access through content restrictions. Do you have any questions? Use the comment box at the bottom of the video. Thank you for joining us.